In the next episode, we see that Nagi has managed to bring all the adventurers out of the dungeon. However, they are tied up tightly with ropes, unable to move. As they wait outside, a carriage approaches from the distance. Noticing it, Nagi waves his hand, signaling it to stop. The carriage halts nearby, and a female officer steps out. She is dressed in the uniform of a white-level guard, and is revealed to be a dungeon inspector. The officer approaches Nagi and questions him, confirming his identity as the registered dungeon porter. She mentions that she has received reports of criminal activities occurring inside the dungeon. Nagi confirms the situation, prompting the officer to examine the tied-up adventurers. Observing their poor condition, she asks Nagi how they ended up like that. Instead of explaining outright, Nagi calmly responds, rather than he explaining, it's better if she hear it for herself. Saying this, 4 adventurers' voice comes out of his magical bag, which have captured the conversations and actions of the adventurers when they tried to kill him. The officer is shocked to see the capabilities of that bag. Listens to the recordings. She hears every incriminating word the adventurers said during their betrayal. As the recordings play, she starts drafting crime-related documents based on the evidence. After finishing her report, the officer looks at Nagi with curiosity and asks, "How did you manage to overpower and capture 4 skilled adventurers?" From their symptoms and the purplish tint on their faces, it looks like they were affected by ashwood mushrooms. Hearing this, Nagi smirks and replies, "They accidentally ate stew made from those mushrooms. I guess it started showing symptoms right when they decided to attack me." Nagi then walks over to the tied-up leader and mockingly says, he is lucky. Honestly, he didn't think he is able to beat all of them. Then we are shown what actually happened in the dungeon, revealing the truth behind Nagi's words. While it's true that the adventurers ate the mushroom-laced stew, there's more to the story than what Nagi initially claimed. The scene shifts back to the dungeon, where the golden-ranked leader is furiously trying to fight Nagi. But leader can't counter even one of his attacks effortlessly. Frustrated, the leader unleashes a flurry of 3 swift sword strikes, but Nagi doge all his powerful attacks easily. Seeing an opening, Nagi slides behind the leader. At that moment, the leader suddenly starts feeling dizzy, his body growing weaker. He falters, realizing something is wrong. Noticing the confusion on his opponent's face, Nagi smirks and casually explains the truth. "You are wondering why your body feels heavy, aren't you? That stew you ate earlier, it was poisoned, smoke mushrooms. They enhance the flavor, but they also serve as a little insurance policy against people like you." The leader shock, his thoughts racing as he recalls how Nagi had eagerly served them food earlier. It all makes sense now. He glares at Nagi, realizing too late that the porter had planned this from the start. Nagi once again says that he did all of this solely for the sake of insurance. It was entirely up to them whether they wanted to betray or not, and the reason they ended up falling apart was because he used the catalyst in that situation. This caused the effect of the poisonous mushroom to take hold on them faster. However, he had planned to give them the antidote, which was inside those wine bottles. But some idiot ended up breaking one of the bottles, and now only one bottle remains. At this point, the leader realizes the huge mistake they have made. Then the scene shifts to the present, where the leader, thinking about everything, starts crying and screaming at the officer, saying that what Nagi is saying is true. If they hadn't consumed those poisonous mushrooms, they wouldn't have been defeated. All of this happened because of luck. Because admitting defeat to a porter is humiliating for them. Understanding the situation, the officer tells one of her soldiers to load the supplies into the carriage. Meanwhile, Nagi finishes his work and gets ready to leave. Seeing this, the officer tells him that if he's heading toward the city, she can give him a ride. Hearing this, he asks if the ride is free. While heading toward the city, the officer apologizes to Nagi on behalf of the entire Adventurer Association, saying that he had to face a lot of trouble because of them. However, Nagi replies that as a porter, he's used to dealing with such things. Even so, the officer warns him that all adventurers are part of the Dawn Guild, which is notorious in the area for its arrogance and lawlessness. She explains that no matter the reason, if any of their members are harmed, they will retaliate. That's why she advises him to be careful around those Dawn Guild members. When the officer looks at Nagi, she doesn't understand what he's doing. A monster-like creature suddenly emerges from his bag and has Nagi's head in its mouth. Seeing this, the officer asks if he's even listening to her. Hearing her, Nagi pulls his head out of the creature's mouth and scolds it, saying, "Gluttony, yes, this creature's name is Gluttony. How many times have he told him not to come out like this in front of people?" They get scared. However, the creature tells him that it's hungry. This creature is living inside his bag, and that creature organized the items inside his bag. Before creature started helping him, stuff was always getting tangled up in there. But then, The officer becomes extremely excited upon seeing the creature and starts writing something about it in her diary because she has never seen a creature like this before. When Nagi realizes that his creature is hungry, he suddenly remembers that all the loot they had collected after clearing the dungeon is still with him. This realization makes him happy because it means he has made a significant profit. Feeling joyful, he feeds some magic stones to his creature. As they are about to leave their carriage, their horses suddenly become frightened by something and start panicking uncontrollably. The warrior handling the horses also struggles to control them. At that moment, something happens to Nagi. His eyes suddenly open wide, and strange circular patterns appear in them. He senses that a dungeon break has occurred. He immediately informs the inspector and points toward a distant mountain, stating that the dungeon has broken behind it. Hearing this, the inspector asks how he knows this. Nagi replies that it's his instinct telling him. They don't have much time. They must get out as soon as possible before something happens. The inspector starts thinking to herself, can Nagi really sense a dungeon break just through his instincts? At that moment, the little creature also speaks up, claiming that it can sense a large number of magic stones beyond the mountain, can smell them. As soon as they reach outside, they see a massive dungeon break at that exact location. Seeing this, the inspector looks at Nagi with suspicious eyes and asks how he was able to sense the dungeon break from such a great distance. Hearing this question, Nagi replies that he can never forget this feeling. Then a scene from the past is shown where Nagi had experienced something similar, a time when monsters had destroyed everything around him. Nagi tells the inspector that something strange is going on because if there was such a huge dungeon in the middle of the village, how could no adventurer have ever noticed it? He then asks the inspector to check in her register which rank of adventurers had accepted the dungeon's quest. The lady inspector looks through her register and informs him that the dungeon was classified as a D-rank dungeon, and it had been accepted by 1 mithril rank adventurer and 2 copper rank adventurers. Hearing this, Nagi suggests that they should head toward the village. The officer agrees, saying that she also has a suspicious feeling about this. She then orders her warriors to take the criminals to prison before they leave for the village. When they reach the village, they notice a large crowd gathered near the entrance, angrily yelling at 2 people. The 2 people being shouted at are none other than the copper rank adventurers. The villagers are furious because these 2 had accepted the dungeon clearance quest but had done nothing about it since then. Seeing the angry villagers, the 2 adventurers angrily retort that their leader abandoned them, and clearing the dungeon is not their responsibility. If the villagers have any complaints, they should take it up with the party leader. Standing at a distance, Nagi and the officer observe the situation. The officer remarks that the leader's actions will result in a fine and possibly a case filed against him by the Adventurer Association, but that won't have much impact. It's just like a slap on the wrist for them. Hearing this, Nagi mutters in frustration that merely fining the adventurers is meaningless. What about the villagers who will lose everything? Even if the association is informed and backup is sent, by the time help arrives, the entire village could already be burned to the ground. Despite knowing this, these adventurers are making pathetic excuses. Just then, one of the copper rank adventurers shouts at the villagers, claiming that he is a victim too. His party leader abandoned them, and now he's just passing the time here. Whether the dungeon break happens or not is none of his concern, and he doesn't care about it at all. If the villagers have so many complaints, they should go and file them at the Adventurer Association. He insists that he and his companion are not solely responsible, so they refuse to listen to any more nonsense. Seeing the adventurers' indifference, the officer sighs in exhaustion and declares that there's no other choice. They have to evacuate the village. The lives of the villagers should be their top priority. Hearing this, Nagi grips his ranking badge and says, "Winter is coming soon. Do you really think these people will survive such a harsh winter?" As he speaks, he removes his current ranking badge from his neck and replaces it with a golden ranked badge. Then, with a strange smirk, he walks toward the villagers and adventurers, loudly asking, "So, a dungeon break happened here? I came to check out what's going on." Approaching the officer, he asks, "If someone claims a dungeon break, do they get to take all the loot without paying any fees? Is that correct?" The officer confirms that he is right. The 2 copper rank adventurers stare in shock when they see the golden ranked badge on Nagi's chest. Nagi then turns to them and asks, "Do you 2 want to join me? But the reward split will be 9:1. On the other hand, one of them nervously asks the officer, what would be the penalty for impersonating another adventurer? The officer replies that the minimum penalty would be 1,000 gold coins. Hearing this, Nagi starts panicking internally because the golden ranked badge Nagi was wearing was actually taken from the adventurers he had defeated inside the dungeon.